Oops. And I can't like see back there when I put. Oh, I can see.
Sorry, we're gonna do a more serious back here.
Good evening and welcome to this evening's RSU 14 Wyndham Raymond School District Board of Directors meeting. It is April 11th, 2018. The time is 6:30 and we are in the Wyndham Town Council chambers. May I have a roll call?
You sure can. Kate Grix.
Here.
Eric Colby.
Present.
Janie Cummins.
Here.
Don Dillon.
Here.
Diana Freusland.
Here.
Marge Cavoni.
Here.
Pete Hensler. Anna Keeney. Scott McLean. Here. Genevieve Delano.
Thank you. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I do have an adjustment to the agenda to make. We are not going to be voting tonight. I've heard everybody's input, and as it turns out, we can put the vote off till our next meeting, which is April 25th, so we will be doing that. So our first order of business is to allow for some public input. If anybody would like to speak? Alrighty. Then moving along, tonight we are going to be discussing the 2018-19 budget. The first thing I would like to do is read a letter. Mr. Pete Hensler could not be with us this evening, so he wrote a note that he was hoping we would share with everybody, so it would just give me a couple of minutes. I'm going to actually read his letter. First of all, I was very excited to learn that the healthcare increase was significantly less than what we had budgeted for. It is such a large expense item and so hard to predict from year to year. While it is still an increase, it is certainly much more palatable at that level. I think the A-team and Don Davis and everyone involved have certainly done a great job putting together the overall budget. It is a lot of work and certainly appreciated. With that being said, there are a couple of items that I would like to speak to. The lower than expected insurance cost does not change my opinion on the technology piece of the budget. They are mutually exclusive items as I see it. As I mentioned in one of our previous meetings, I have yet to see any empirical evidence that demonstrates a direct correlation of student performance with the type of device used in school. My hope would be that our students' learning would be centered in the concepts presented by our wonderful teachers, more so than being dependent on our devices that are used. As to the point made about the durability and longevity of the more expensive devices, I certainly hope that that is the case. However, I have yet to see a cost-benefit analysis demonstrating the long-term savings. We have been presented with anecdotal evidence, but nothing more. If the top-of-the-line devices truly do outlast the less expensive alternatives by a notable margin, then we should be on a longer replacement cycle with our devices. The 4-year replacement cycle stemmed from the involvement in the MLTI program, which is no longer offered. Our technology director said that there is still a lot of life left in the 4-year-old MacBook Airs, so if that is the case and we decide to keep using those, we should at least be on a 6-year replacement cycle. For this year, I would prefer us not to get new devices for the high school, and would rather see the lower grades get their 9-year-old machines replaced with something new. I also don't think that the lower grades need both MacBook Airs and iPads at the same time. The A-team and teachers should choose which device type is more appropriate for the age level. The other item that I want to mention is the Katahdin program. Personally, and I'm speaking for Mr. Hensler, I'm beginning to question the cost-benefit value of this as well. Back when it was part of the larger Real School initiative, the differences of a truly alternative setting for students were more apparent. With an expected 24 students and a budget of $477,510, that works out to be $19,896 per student. According to Sandy's budget presentation, the average per pupil cost in our district was $12,430 for the 15-16 school year. That is a significant difference, and with Lisa's budget being $6,400,225 and 519 special needs students, that works out to be $16,185 per special needs student. So that begs the question of whether these 24 students could be served by resources in Lisa's department rather than having a completely different program. It may also need to be a part of a larger discussion on how much money the district spends on individualized learning and if it is at the expense of the larger student population. Please understand that I am well aware that the school board cannot directly dictate how the approved budget money is spent and that we are voting on a budget total, but I would be remiss if I did not share my thoughts on the matters stated above. So those were comments presented by Pete. I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware.
Thank you.
So to that end, since he brought up the Katahdin program, I just want to say that tonight we're having our budget discussions and deliberations. We're not opening up discussions on whether, the merits of the Katahdin program. We are continuing with the Katahdin program as, we received in our cost center presentations. And I think that we should have a workshop or some sort of open discussion at a future time. Okay? Just to put some parameters down.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So. Right, but just to say, tonight, we're not going to debate the Katahdin program. That's not going to be our purpose this evening. We can have future discussions.
But technology is fair game.
That's what I was saying.
I think that's what he I think that's where he was going. Sorry, Bob.
So, would you prefer to have Bob come up first, unless anybody would like to share some comments prior to that?
I would just like to ask for clarification. Don, does it look as though the percent of increase for the town of Wyndham would be looking at a 11.15% increase, and town of Raymond would be looking at a 1.79% increase?
That's correct, and that's given that the Finance Committee has not yet met to discuss what the carry forward might look like. So right now I think we're going to be scheduling a meeting for the 25th of that group to look at that, as well as to look, not to convolute this, but as well as to look at the capital reserve fund and what might be added to a warrant for that. My point with this is that I'm thinking that at least preliminarily we can probably increase the carry forward from the current 750 level to some number that will help with the taxation.
Okay.
But those numbers are accurate.
Okay.
So who would like to chat first?
I guess I have another question, Don.
Mm-hmm.
Now, right now, I think we are, I lost my figures. We are looking at with version 6, it's a 2.48%
That's correct.
on the overall budget.
Yes.
In order, and you had told us once before, but I can't remember what the number was, how much would we have to decrease the budget in order to decrease that percent?
Well, basically you take the $45 million is a point times 1%, so it's 450. I'm using very rough numbers, but 450,000 roughly for a point.
That's not a whole. Is that a whole percent, or that's just
that would be a whole percent?
A whole percent.
450, rough numbers.
To get it down to what now?
To decrease 1%.
To decrease it, to take this down 1%, which would take it to 1.48. We would have to reduce it by approximately 450,000. it's just a good number to have in mind or whatever, so figure out what the effect of anything might
Again, I'm
be.
using approximates, but that's right.
Okay, the elephant in the room is computers,
I
right?
know.
And I know I have a few questions, but I'm thinking that maybe Mr. Hickey has something to share. I'm not sure.
Would you like to sit at the table? It might be more
Yeah,
comfortable.
easier.
Oh, sure. And you might be
brace
here a
yourself.
while.
Yeah, we can grill you a little closer.
Thank you.
Okay, we heard the message from not just Pete, but Marge and other board members last time to take a look and see if there were some things we could do, like longevity of the machines. So we took a look at different options, and you can see that we've got options A, which is leave the budget as it is, buy 4 years of MacBook Airs at the high school. And that's roughly $300,000 a year. I just rounded up a little. It's $299 and change, but just to make the numbers not a lot less messy, we're looking at $300,000 a year to leave as is. Now, one option we looked at, we kind of threw out, buy 3 grades and forego 1. It didn't make any sense because you're incurring most of the expense. So the option that makes the most sense to us is to buy 2 grades of MacBook Airs in the high school this coming year, put off the other 2 for a year. It saves $150,000 in the current year budget, and I'll get into the timing on the chart on the back later. Another option is to buy 1 year of MacBook Airs now and put off the other 3 grades purchase. You can see in the bold, there's not much left of the MLTI program, but there is a grant that is eligible, and it is 3 years, staff machines only, $200 per device per year, times 3 years, $600 per staff device. And when you do that times the 81 eligible high school staff, it comes to $48,600 over the 3 years. So that is money that we would lose if we only bought 1 year, bought 1 grade of devices. So to me, it doesn't make a lot of sense to walk away from $48,000. That's not local money. So clearly, we're kind of leaning strongly towards the buy 2 in July, buy 2 more grades the year after. All of the options on the table you can see in the green print at the bottom are 3 years of Apple Care to try and minimize the cost of that. And then we kind of take our chances on the 4th year. So getting into this executive summary is confusing because it's not my executive summary. This is a copy of the executive summary from the audit report. And they clearly state in there, this came from page 2, the second bolded paragraph. For student devices, built a multi-year plan consolidated into a single platform, and this independent auditor recommended Mac for our district. So that's kind of what we're trying to do, is stay to the same platform, stay with what was recommended by an outside disinterested party who is an expert in technology, and build the platform, continue to build the platform that, quite frankly, 3/4 of our devices are now. So you can see towards the end of that paragraph, they're saying, expecting the technology team to provide adequate support for devices that are 6 or 7 years old is unrealistic. So in reference to Pete's written statement, when you get out 6 years, it's old. Now, we're exceeding that now with the 9-year-old white MacBooks, but it's clearly not industry standard. It's not best practice. It's not recommended. So just keep that in the back of our mind as we look at how long we want to retain things. This chart, it's the ugly spreadsheet you get every year to show the timeline of when we make the purchases and when they're incurred and when they expire and when they will collide. So the top half above the yellow horizontal line is the way the budget is now. If we were to stay the course with the current purchasing pattern, it would be like this. The second one is me making assumptions on what the board would want, because there's many permutations on exactly how you'd like to proceed. But you can see the lower 2 lines in the pink. That's if we buy MacBook Airs 1-to-1 grades 9 to 10 this year, and then we stagger the 11-12 purchase for a year. Now, what that does is we're still not too bad in terms of the sinusoidal wave of expense. If we were to push out the second purchase for 2 years, then I took it out because this diagram was getting too busy. But in the equivalent of the L column, the rightmost column, in rows 14 and 18, which is 18 is the bottom line, is half cut off. If we were to push that high school purchase off another year, we would collide with needing 6th grade MacBook Airs and high school machines in that same year. So we're kind of staying away from that. So what makes most sense to the administrative team is to purchase, stave off the purchase, keep to the platform, stick to what's recommended in the audit, stick to what we know is working, and those are kind of our thoughts. Also, I kind of skipped over something. What did I leave in? Oh, towards the bottom of the first page, the 82,000. So we would lose that 48,000, of which we would get 1/3 a year for 3 years, 16,000 a year. And then there is detail on what we would need to do if we didn't get anything, or we got insufficient number, like if we only bought 1 year. The MacBook Airs at the high school were intended to upgrade the devices in the lower grades and provide a spare pool. When we cut that back too much, spare pool out the window, we're buying new machines for spares. But Wyndham Primary School could get by with a year of what they have as long as the iPads don't get cut. If they go from 5 iPads per class to 10, that's roughly a 1 to 2. Kyle has told me they could live with that. They have PCs in grades 2 and 3, which they need for NWEA assessment, grades 2 and 3, MEA assessment, grade 3. Kyle says they can live with those devices for another year. Randy and RES can't live with what they have. They have the MacBook Airs. They're going to be 10 years old. They don't use them. They're so bad. They don't have anything else to fall back on. So when we cut too far into that purchasing and spare pool, which 2 years we could get by with the amount of spares that would make. If we got 1 year of purchase and then staved off the rest of the purchase, we're hurting with the pool to cover plus a spare pool. So if there are any questions, yes?
I have one question because you just said a lot.
Okay.
I want to kind of go back to kind of like the beginning of what you first said when you went through A, B, and C.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I heard in the beginning that if anything, what everybody could live with would be B. Is that correct or incorrect? Because you talked a lot after that.
Right.
And,
I mean, clearly, Marge, we would like A.
yeah, I know it's A. But other than what you would like.
Could we survive with B? We could survive with B.
Okay. That, I guess, is my,
Yep.
is my question.
But C sounds not very doable.
No.
No, because we lose 48,000 of state money, plus we would need to incur another 33,000 of either MacBook Airs for those grade levels in Raymond or iPads with keyboards. And I have, detail, but I didn't want your heads to pop off from too much that I
Thank you. Yes.
So if we did D, we would have to have some you would have to have some guarantee that it would continue.
Right. To get that $48,000 from the state, they will give you all the high school staff machine reimbursement, but there is an expectation, a promise to the state that within a reasonable time, a year or two at the most, that you would buy the rest of the devices for the rest of the grades. And this grant is only for high school devices, so we couldn't apply this grant towards staff at the K3 level. It just doesn't work.
I think I'll try to channel Pete before. So I think this was great, but I think one of the things that if he was here, he'd probably say, well, you're not giving him that cost analysis for the other computer. We're still working with the MacBook Air.
Your button's not on, that's why he's waving. Start over.
So I guess he would be curious what was the cost of it. What's the pain in switching?
Well, we get to, another platform other than what we've built towards for many years. And I'm happy to defer to the educators as far as the educational merit of the device. I think somewhat, especially from Kyle, Randy, and Chris last time, you heard, why those devices. And I'm sure they're happy to come up and talk more about that. but especially with like iPads, there's specialized devices, special apps, and the longevity of the MacBook Air, as Chris mentioned, this is what we're proposing, that we would leverage that longevity of that device.
Being Android, though, being an open platform, nobody's copying those certain apps, and they're not out there in any different format.
There are apps, educational apps on the Google platform.
Whether they're good or not,
Chrome OS.
Maybe something for them. I mean, I guess I look at it, you guys can tell me if I'm right or wrong, but so some of the pain I would imagine, just because I work with a computer and it's a tool for me. Some of the pain would be switching is time for a lot of the teachers to adapt to a new platform. Mm-hmm. That time in the instruction where they're trying to learn something new. So that would probably get over that, mm-hmm. but that's still a time of pain, and we've already put a lot of things on them for the curriculum that they've got to develop. There's just a lot of things on their time. Excellent. But I know that's going to come up, so just
sure.
Just a thought.
Pete, my question is, what's the problem with Macs other than the price? Is there a problem? Is there a problem with?
I think the main thing is price. I think the main thing is price. Like we could ask Scott, is that one of the concerns?
That's price? Probably. I would say that's probably my biggest concern. But we keep throwing out words like longevity, but we're going to replace them in 4 years. I heard you say 6 years is unrealistic. What about 5? I mean, what happens to these machines after 5 years?
Well, I'm quoting the auditor when they say 6 years is unrealistic. It is getting long in the tooth, mm-hmm. and we are starting to push the envelope. But clearly, look at the white MacBooks that we have. Long time. So we push things as long as it's practical, and when it's not, like in poor Randy's case and RES's case,
right?
We've pushed it beyond and we've left them with nothing. Mm-hmm. So
I don't think that anybody up here is saying that there's a few of the younger grades that really definitely need, an upgrade. I just think that we're kind of wondering, for the price that we're paying, do we need to cycle through these things every 4 years? And do we need to continue with the MacBook Air, which, has that perception, I guess, mm-hmm. that it's an expensive tool. Mm-hmm. So I guess that's where my concern is.
Mm-hmm. Well, it was last meeting, Kate had asked me to come up with, is there a trend? What are other people using? And more than anything else, there was more MacBook Airs at the high school level than anything else. But you can see that people are all over the place with preference. So it really comes down to organizational preference. And what are you good at? What will you be comfortable with? What are you going to leverage for success? You could put anything in front of them, but if they hate the device, right. like the netbooks, people will disagree with me. For the most part, they worked. They were slow, but people hated them. So there was a lack of success due to the device.
And another concern I have would be support. Would we have support for the Macs and support for the Google or whatever, the PCs? Would we need support for both instead of if we did something different?
Right, because currently we're supporting PC and Mac, and the PCs are going to be phased out to ed techs and staff, mm-hmm. and as far as children care, not at all. So instead of 2 platforms there's always been like 2 worlds. There was like NetWare and Microsoft, and then there was Unix, Linux, and Microsoft, and now there's Mac, which is a Unix, Linux derivative, and Microsoft. So there's always been 2 worlds. Supporting both worlds is harder, more expensive, as the auditor mentioned. So if we could get off of supporting 2 worlds, whether it's, Windows Mac or Mac Chrome, it's not optimal to support 2 worlds.
Which I got.
Yeah. Yes.
Just a question. If we were to go with B,
mm-hmm.
right, and left everything else status quo, after next year, not this year, because you'd only be buying half of them in next year, would from there on out just be a replacement of of the computers and no? See, I think the problem is, or the problem I have is, every time we turn around, it's additional. It's not like, I don't mind the replacements, and I understand the single platform. I get that, especially where we're trying to have everybody, you're graduating from one school to another, to another, to another. You want to keep the same thing. But we keep adding. I would feel a lot more comfortable with the budget that it's kind of like, okay, we've got everybody covered now. So now it's just, we are on a replacement, cycle, because as we know, our budget keeps going up because we keep adding things, and then that becomes the norm. We never take anything away. It never goes away. We just keep adding. So if we go into, it's kind of like makes me think of like the buses. The buses, we've got them, there's no big surprises there other than if one falls apart or whatever, but it's kind of like we replace them every so often, so we know, it's kind of like you know what to expect. So my question is, would this be the end?
I'm thinking no, because optimally at K1 you're still at one device for 2 children. So if the district ever does support 1-to-1 at that level, we're not there yet. And then also there's kind of a staggered purchase. I'm not showing the existing iPads, the 150 iPads we already got for K1. So we're close, Marge, but we're not exactly.
Well, that's that's for 1-to-1, but that says we go. I personally, K-1, a 1-to-1 on an iPad. I mean, we buy the additional what we're getting because they said they need them, and that is like fine. But when I walk through the primary school, I walk by one classroom where kids were on computers. And it didn't happen to be an iPad, by the way. And it was more teacher student. Like even when I go to RES, it's the teachers who are teaching the students. So to me, it's kind of like putting everybody on a 1-to-1 on an iPad, and they also, at those lower grades, have the computers that we've been passed down that they're using to do their testing and everything else. So that's assuming that we are going to approve that every student in all of our schools has a computer of some sort, either a computer or an iPad or something.
Yeah, on your point, Kyle could speak to it better than I could, but clearly if you've got a school with currently one computer for every 4 kids, and what they have are 9-year-old MacBooks, and then you see them not using them, that's not proof that the iPads aren't.
No, I don't mean that. But what I'm saying is I don't see the rationale to approve a 1-on-1 for every student in K-1 to have an iPad.
I'm not saying that here tonight. I'm just saying if the district decides, because I know there's some dissension in that area, but if the district decides, I'm not going to sit here and promise you we're at a point where we just replace what we have, because we're not. If the district decides to go to 1-to-1,
I understand that.
Yeah.
But so all bets are off is what you're saying. It's kind of like could be anything.
We're close to
okay, that's fine.
Replacement. Yeah.
I guess I come at it from just a little bit of a different angle, only because I did get the privilege of sitting on the technology board and listening. Back in the heyday of the technology committee, there were people, and I'm not going to get the right titles right, but that helped the teachers, supported the teachers in each building and all that. And hearing some of the the younger grades with the older computers and the headaches and stuff like that, I'm like, I wouldn't want to work under that condition. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the way I look at it. I look at it from a tool standpoint. What do I want when I'm working? You know what I mean? My company bought me a computer, but I also had a lot of programs I had to put on it, and they had to turn around and buy me one with a solid state drive if I was going to work at the speed at which the work was coming in. So sometimes it's a good tool.
Well, yeah, I'm not talking about the ones because there's computers that are going down. I'm back to those 1-to-1 iPads for little people.
I didn't think we were 1-to-1 at that point, were we?
But that's fine.
We were 2-to-1, weren't we?
We're at 1-to-4, and we hope to go to 1-to-2 with what's in the budget.
Right. But that's what I was saying. That beyond this budget is what I was talking about. And you said, and you answered me. You said, well, they might want a 1-to-1.
I don't think we have a crystal ball for
I know.
down the road, really. If I might. Yes, thank you. I keep going back to the technology, what do we call it? Assessment? Audit.
Audit.
audit, and we pay good money for somebody from the outside to really take a deep dive into our technology in the district. And the thing that still resonates, and I'm not getting the sense that there's too much pushback at this point, but a single platform to me makes perfect sense from a support standpoint, from a user standpoint, from transitioning from building to building, all the reasons that we know. So I am comfortable with the same platform. As far as MacBook Airs, they are expensive, and so I think of the bus scenario where it's a looping, every 2 years, or I don't even know what is it, 2 years, 3 years, whatever it is, yeah, where we just are constantly being current. So there's no drop off and ledge like we've experienced in past years where all of a sudden we're hit with these bazillion buses and we're like, oh my gosh, the sky is falling. I don't really want that to happen with technology because I think it's too important to have consistency. So when I think about the 4 years, and I was talking to Mr. Hickey, I don't know when it was, today, yesterday, and it seems to me, and maybe I'm not playing with the full deck here, but if we go every 4 years, full out, 4 grades, we're constantly going to have this cliff because you're going to have 4 years, and then you're going to shove them down, and they're going to have 4-year-old machines, and by the time we go back and replenish the high school again, they're again going to be 8 years old. Mm-hmm. And you're never going to get away from that cliff that the lower grades are having machines that are much older. And so I'm hoping that if we do a 2-year cycle, and again, I'm sorry if I'm going to be asking redundant questions of the administrators, but if we did a 2-year cycle, if that would alleviate that, for me, it would be a cost savings, and it would make the loop a little more even, so we don't have that drop off every 4 years. Does that make sense?
So are you saying the oldest machines would be 6 years old instead of 8 years old at the end of their life? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying, what am I saying? I'm saying that, okay, help me out here. If we buy 2 years worth instead of, 2 classes worth instead of 4 classes, and we have 500 units that we're moving down instead of 1,000.
So what is the worst case scenario? Since now it's 9 years, are we still there?
Isn't there a way to loop this so it's not? Somebody help me here. I'm not doing the math right. But does this? Do you see what I'm saying?
I do see what you're saying. But remember, I kind of made a statement a couple of years back at a board meeting that we have 3,100 kids. So you spread that out, and it comes, if you keep renewing, the figure I came up with at the time, and I don't have the justification in front of me right now, was roughly like $1 million a year, because that's the year that you're doing that group. So by the time you figure in, it's a large number of students, it's a long period of time, and to keep them somewhat current, it's expensive, no matter how you look at it. So we can look at these and look at swapping the times around, we kind of have, and if we shuffle them too much more from what we've recommended, we're going to have bumps, cliffs of 2 schools at the same time, which is not.
Help me, I'm thinking I like B.
Yeah.
How is that different from what I just said? Because
I don't think it is.
It isn't, or it is?
You're more forward thinking and smarter than I am, Kate, because you're thinking, okay, so if after next year, well, this coming summer, we would have 500 machines. The following year, we would have 500 machines. So it helps us rather than 1,000 machines that go everywhere at once. It's more manageable for my staff, quite frankly, selfishly for the tech department, but you're still going to get 1,000 machines within a year of when you wanted them out anyway. I really need to think about what you've told me, because I think there's more to it than what I've thought through.
And I'm not even sure what I just said.
So that,
Can I ask you a question then? Just if there's the 550 devices to hand down,
Mhm.
and you're saying that the spare pool though is going to be very small. In addition to the 550 we're handing down, are you saying that you feel a need to buy some additional devices anyway because it's too thin?
Well, Kyle's good, and he said we'll live with PCs, and he's not putting pressure on me right now. But when the PCs wear out, there's 200 kids per grade in Wyndham and another 50 per grade in Raymond. So you're talking 250. Like for now, we're good, but go out a few years when we don't have the PCs to fall back on. So I'm just trying to think of all these. Like I mentioned, the permutations are almost limitless on how you would want to implement this, the ramifications of each decision. So
I think for me, I'm trying to kill two birds with one stone. I want, because we hear about the longevity of these machines, it seems like they should be useful in high school longer than 4 years.
Mhm.
But I also understand the age of the lower grades, so I'm trying to find a happy medium where maybe not all of them are new,
Mhm.
but some of them are new,
Mhm.
and then the shifting down, which I think is kind of what you're doing in B, isn't it?
It is. It is. And we're transitioning K1 more and more to iPad because that makes most sense at that level. So really we're looking at grades 2 through 12, those 10 years or so in there.
Okay,
But aren't they, oh,
Sorry.
sorry.
Go ahead, Jan.
so just thinking this through from a teacher point of view, you have in your classroom you have new machine
Mhm.
and you have 5-year-old machine in the same classroom. So some of them work really well, some of them not so much. A couple of them have the spinning circle of death.
Mhm.
How do you manage that?
Well, right now we're kind of lucky because we're at a point where the old hardware and the new hardware can take the newest operating system and it'll run on both. And it'll be a little bit slower on the older. It's just when you get a hard drive that's more than 5 years old, you don't throw the machine out, but anytime from there on is borrowed time. Now that drive may last 10 years, you don't know. But beyond 5 years is a good idea to look at replacements.
Well, I had the 9-year-old computers when they were 7 years old,
Mm-hmm.
and they were hard to work with.
Mhm.
If there weren't mics on, I would tell you exactly how hard they were to work with. But so I'm definitely for new machine,
Thank you.
and I think at the iPad level, of 2 to 1 is very manageable. I believe.
Yeah, I just had, because we're concentrating on the high school right now, but in actuality, these other machines are also going to, at some point in time, as we go along, the high school ones are moving, but so won't the other Macias that we bought once we buy new ones. So that's that whole scenario you have down here. So even though we're rotating 500 this year, maybe 500 next year, I think right after that we're rotating some others from other grades. I can't go through your whole sheet here, but I know they keep moving
Right.
as we purchase new ones down there.
Mhm.
So I think that
Well, that was
I don't want to call
intent.
not surplus, it's spares. So I think the spare pool just keeps refilling.
Mhm.
Kind of like it refurbishes, it refills the demand, right? Am I wrong or right?
Yeah, as much as possible, we keep spares going. When we run out, we're going to have to go to like the laptop insurance money or whatever to buy spares. So we just have to do what we have to do to keep going.
Yeah. You know, the one thing I did find in that assessment that I thought, and it's probably one of the things that kind of kicked me off a bit, was, it was in the recommendation, and it was on page 6. And it was to build a multi-year master plan for student devices that include realistic device retirement dates. The next sentence was, the goal for RSU 14 is not getting every student a device. The goal must be to leverage quality devices in the educational process, improving the learning and teaching, anyway, blah, 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 supporting the devices. So I think that was kind of it. It's kind of like, so to me, the recommendation was not every student has to have one. And I'm
Well,
not
I
against,
just-
and I'm not against
I
that.
read
I just-
that differently.
Yeah,
I read that was our,
No, it was their recommendation. We didn't give recommendations.
right, but they're an IT company, they're really not an educator. You know what I mean? So I'm not sure.
I know, but we're
was a
using,
great
if we're
idea,
using,
but-
that's what I'm saying, but if we're using, like he said, well, their recommendation is do it so many years. So, we can't, I don't think we can pick up part of their recommendation and not the rest of it.
I have to go back to
Yeah, I know. I'm with you on that.
the numbers for the first and second grade. So if we were going to do what was currently in the budget, so was that to get those grades 1-to-1?
No, nobody's mentioned 1-to-1 to me, and I know there's not full support for it on the board, and I'm not pushing it. I'm just saying that currently we have at K1 5 devices for a class of, say, roughly 20 to 25. So you have roughly 1 device for 4 students, and then the recommendation and what's in the budget so far is 5 more for K-3. So it would bring 2-3 from like no iPads to 5 per classroom.
But not the iPads.
Okay.
It's not the iPads. I'm trying to think through the MacBook Airs. If they're going to be handed down to the first and second grade level, what are the numbers that you're talking about? We're not, the
I'd have
goal
to
isn't.
get back to you, Diana, because it's sporadic and like they've not used it all in Raymond, and they have some at K1. I'm not sure how much they're used, and maybe Kyle would like to speak to that. I don't know.
Well, because that's what I was trying to think through. So if we cut it in half to the 550, how many are getting down to those levels then?
Well, again, this is like new information that we aren't getting them all and we are rolling them back. So I'm not fully prepared to say these many people are exactly getting these many, because what it would cover is definitely RES for devices that they needed, especially second and third. So there's 100 of your 550. And then I would talk further with Kyle about, keep the PCs in place or replace those. I mean, optimally, it would be great if we had infinite resources that were all on the same platform, so they wouldn't have an iPad in K1, jump to a PC in 2-3, go back to, a MacBook Air. Mm-hmm. If we had enough devices, we have to be creative with that, and I don't have that nailed down to that level of detail, to be honest with you. But it would be also spares for, ed techs who are using white MacBooks. It would be spares for the high school machines, because again, even if we get 2 grades, the other 2 grades, we have to supply our own spares. It's not part of Milty. We don't have the 2% spare pool.
How many spares do you have currently? Where does that stand?
For the high school?
For anybody.
Just do you know where that spare pool is at?
We're in pretty good shape for 7-8 because it's the state program. It's Milty still. For the high school, we don't have a lot of spares. We've bought some spares because we ran out. For 4-5, that's new this year, and again, that's a direct purchase from Apple, so there's no spare pool from there. So what we've had to do is, when we run out, we've had to order a few spares here and there directly from Apple. So we don't have a large glut. There's somewhere from the Manchester pool, I want to say there's somewhere between 10 and 20 spares, but those are staff devices, which has come in really handy because there's been new administrators who, shifted jobs or whatever, prefer Mac, or some ed techs. So that's come in handy. So we have a spare pool from the Manchester purchase, but they're staff machines. They're not student devices. Their student devices are smaller.
Yes. Next year, the 6th grade in the middle school has an additional, I'm going to say 30, that's not the right number. 30 more 6th graders. It's up there anyway, than they have this year. Where do the computers for those kids come from?
Roll them up, maybe.
Yeah. Roll them right along.
I mean, what would your plan? How do you plan that? I mean, how do they move? Do they take them with them? I don't know. Are you one down? They have them. I'm sorry. I'm not looking at you. I'm looking past you at Danielle, and I apologize. But maybe do they have them down at the Manchester one-on-one? now?
Yes. And they would be able to, I mean, I haven't talked to anybody about this, but it would make perfect sense that if they take them all back over the summer and re-image and fix them all up, get them ready to go, and I think they would just automatically adjust the numbers so they would have the ones they need.
Okay. I guess okay, because I think this is only a me statement. The more we talk about this, the more confused I get. I have to tell you that. So at this point in time, I think I would say for me, because I was not a proponent. So if we were to go with B, I would totally support your technology program.
Orange.
That's my me statement at the moment.
Which plan is in the budget now?
A.
I don't have it in front of me, but maybe somebody can help me. Maybe Marge or you can help me. But in that audit, what were they saying in the amount of people in the IT department versus the internal customers? Was that adequate? Was it not adequate? Was it?
They really couched and didn't really directly answer that question, even though we pushed hard. And I went through the Infotech research group. They're like the Gartner group. I pushed them hard. It's really none of them want to commit to an answer. It's just, well, here's kind of sort of.
No.
Some of the things that I've been requested to come up with are like best practices and standards in education and in business. You get to a certain point, and there just really isn't that data to go to.
So to me, he's part of the puzzle, but he's not all of it. Obviously, the A team behind them, are funneling through them, but they have things we don't hear from are you guys on what your needs and why you might like something, might feel it's more beneficial for one option versus another. You know what I mean? Not put you on the spot, but I mean, I think it's all being focused towards Bob. He's like, do what you want me to do. But a lot of that request, I got to believe, is coming from A-Team saying, hey, we need this. I mean, we're hearing Randy say, I'm at the end of my, life. She had him a couple of years ago. That's the part that, I mean, I don't want to spend money more than you need to, but I want to make sure people have the tools to be successful at what they're doing and not spending it out. I used to listen to when they had to hook them up to the car and this wasn't running and that wasn't running. I mean, hours were missed.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't think we're realizing that when an hour is missed here and an hour is missed there, it adds up quickly. Yeah. And that's a cost too. And so we're not looking at that cost of misuse time or unused time or unproductive time.
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody want to jump up now? I just think it's important for us to hear that piece of it.
I think, though, as we look around, is everybody comfortable with the iPads? Because nobody's even brought up the iPads. So are we fine with the iPads?
I am, yeah.
Okay.
Very supportive of that.
My biggest thing is 4 years. That's my biggest hurdle.
Right, the time.
The timeline. The time. Yeah. That's my biggest hurdle.
But that's why Randy's up here, because him and Kyle end up with a longer time. They're the ones that end up with that longer time. And what are the pains that they're feeling with a longer stretch?
Right. So it's a 4-year purchasing cycle, but it's not a 4-year use cycle.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So for some kids now, it's an 8 and 9 year use cycle. Mm-hmm. So that's where we get in trouble. So that it's not like the machines that are coming down from the high school are only going to be used one more year. We're not getting rid of those. Right? It's a 4-year purchase.
Okay,
cycle,
I see.
But not a 4-year use cycle.
Okay, so we are purchasing them every 4 years, but that does not dictate the age. We're not throwing them out.
Oh no.
At
he's
4
got
years.
9 years. He got 9-year-old computers.
Because I'm seeing that on your sheet here that you sent. You sent us a while ago, Bob, as far as the age of some of these machines. So, yeah, I definitely think that it's time to, supply some of the younger kids with some newer machines. But how long are those machines going to last before we need to say we need to replace those machines? I'm thinking long term.
Right. Well, we use absolutely everything as long as it's practical. Like the original iPads we got for special ed and just pockets of purchases, they got to a point where they wouldn't run apps anymore. So we run them until the technology says, I give up. So we try and squeeze every nickel out of them, but there comes this point when they're not practical.
And I think part of... Part of the issue is with the newer one going there versus the high school coming down. As the programs that the high school kids are using are more powerful and needing more processing speed, it makes sense for them to have that. I don't know if you were able to go that. I wasn't there this last one for Bagels and Bites, but there's some pretty neat things that they're doing now at that level that take that more power where they may not need it down there. That's why going back like that to me wouldn't maybe make as much sense.
Right, because the younger kids aren't producers on technology like the older kids are. They're not creating iMovies and slideshows with multimedia and graphics. They're not doing that in first and second grade. So what they need for power is they're running things that are built for them, right? So you're absolutely right on track with that. And 5 and 6 years seems like a very reasonable expectation for the Apple products. I mean, who knows with the iPads, but that's our past experience.
What kind of pain are the teachers having with the 9-year-old?
They don't do certain things because they don't want to spend the time trying to make sure everybody's working and it's ready to go, and now we can actually do the learning. So you don't. I mean, you're right on target in terms of you got a teacher with 20 years experience. You're paying them $60-something thousand. Do you want them dubbing around with computers for 15 to 20 minutes instead of teaching? I mean, that there is a cost there. So they're going to do what they feel they can trust the machine to do, but they're not going to take risks with it. And we don't have. I mean, the spare pool is whatever we have loaned into K and 1, but when we need them, we go down and say, "We told you it was a spare," and we take it back. So there isn't much of a spare pool.
Marge was
sorry. I think I asked this before, but I forgot what the answer was. What did we ever do with those 200 iPads that we bought for the 6th grade? Remember they had them and then they didn't like them?
They had to be turned back to
Did
Milton.
we turn them back? I can't remember.
The school board voted against iPads for 6th grade. That's where the Dell computers came from that are in 2-3 now.
I thought we got iPads one year because Charlie wanted them.
He pushed for it. He lost. The board said no iPads for 6th grade. It didn't make sense. So that's where we ended up with the Dells that are in 2nd and 3rd now.
And MLTI gave us iPads for 2 years, and that was in 7th and 8th grade. Not the best match. iPads in 7th and 8th grade.
right. Remember
But
that.
that was a state.
Jenny?
I know that I just don't want to belabor the point. However, you all know the Ed Sullivan Show and the person who would spin the plates?
I do because I'm older. I don't know if
Well, that's what it's like working with those computers, those now 9-year-old computers. If you're a teacher, you have one that's working, and you have to go to the next one, go to the next one, and go to the next one, then go back to the first one, then go to that constant, that Randy's point about, do you want to take a teacher with 20 years experience, and all that person is doing is trying to make sure that they're all working. It is beyond frustrating, and so you don't find yourself doing the things that you could be doing. So I think the iPads is a great idea for K1, and I'm fully supportive.
Could add some.
Yeah, and then Ms. Brick says.
And I was just thinking about my 2nd or 3rd year as an administrator. The Raymond textbook budget between the two buildings was $25,000. The Raymond textbook budget now between the two buildings is probably $7,000. And that's 10 years ago. And I don't know what the cost of textbooks have gone up, but we don't buy a lot of textbooks for history and science. I mean, sometimes just resource material like atlases that are paperback and things like that. So technology has replaced some things. I'm not sure the use of paper has gone down, but they said it would.
we have those copy machines.
Yeah, I know, but it definitely changes the text cost and other programs you might buy in a kit or a box or.
Yes. Well, first of all, I want to thank y'all in the audience for being so patient with us. We probably talk about this more than we have an opportunity to talk about it. So if we seem redundant, or I should talk about myself, and I keep asking the same things over and over, it's taken me about 3 times for it to get through the loop. But I have come personally to the conclusion that I can't isolate the fact that the longevity of a machine could last 5 or 6 years at the high school. I've now taken the stance, which could change in about a nanosecond, but now I'm taking the stance that looking at the big picture, it makes sense to me to, for the good of the whole district and for the benefit of the younger grades, to go with our original plan. And not get so caught up in, but yeah, why aren't they staying at the high school for 5 or 6 years? It's true they're not, but those machines are filtering down where they are 9 years old, and that's how I can justify it, because the spinning plate thing doesn't do anybody favors. Staff, students, you, the whole shebang. So thank you for letting me spin my wheels here a little bit, but I've come back full circle. And even from a financial standpoint, and Don, you could probably speak to this, but the savings of $150,000 would be infinitesimal in the overall budget percent reduction. And so I'm even taking that off my plate. For me, it has no bearing because it's not impactful, that small amount on a $45 million budget. So now that I've blabbed forever, I would like to support the original plan.
Thanks, Kate. Appreciate it.
I just want to make sure I still don't have a grasp of then how many devices will end up being handed down, because I don't want to do any harm if we went with B. But if we stick with the current scenario and the time frame, how does that get better? Like you said, are they always going to end up with 8-year-old machines anyway?
I think you're cutting off. You're adding an extra year to the whole hand down if you go with B.
Well, we're not just talking just high school to just K3 either. As we look at this, like when the 6th grade machines come off, there's a group there. When the 4 or 5 machines come off, there's a group there. So it's not just we have this one group feeding one group. It's always going to be 8 years.
That's a good point, because I hadn't considered that. So thanks for mentioning that.
Any other comments? Yeah?
I couldn't support
Right,
it.
Janice. It's okay. That's why I like hands.
I'm supportive of A, but I was from the beginning. I think it's an important, a vital teaching piece. And so.
Yes,
I'm
sir.
going to support A as well, just because it's hard to ask somebody to be the best they can be and not give them the tools to make that. I'm not saying everybody is going to use it to the best, but I don't want to limit anybody that wants to be at the top of their game and limit them without the proper tools, or impede them by not giving them the proper tools.
I'm gonna stick with my B, and I think I'm probably going overboard by even doing that, because there are districts that don't supply any computers to their students, and I don't think their education is any less than what we're giving our students here. Cumberland, for one, they don't supply. Right, Chris? Yep. So I'm just going to stick with my B.
Yes, Dawn.
Can I'm not sure between A and B, but I keep going back to the single platform. So at what point in time are we at that single platform?
We're close to it now if this year's budget is ratified, because we're rotating out the grades 2 and 3 at the primary school, which are the only ones that are PC, and then they'll go back to staff and ed techs. And it's abysmal what we give ed techs to work with. They're on the white 9-year-old machines, and they're trying to help kids.
Okay. And is there any downside to it all going to this platform, would you say? Like, is there any, with the teachers, staff, using Macs versus PCs? Is there?
I don't think there's a downside because the Milty program, there's so many schools over the last, 14, 16 years, however long the program's been in existence, that there's been Apple at all grade levels.
And so
I
when they graduate, though, is that what seems to be needed in the business world or in different, careers?
Honestly, it really doesn't matter that much anymore because we see people with an Apple phone or a Droid phone and a different Office suite than Microsoft Office, and everybody functions.
Okay, yeah, I just needed to give some clarification on that, so that helps. Thank you.
Mr. Howell.
Did somebody press the button? Did you press the button?
I stopped because Mr. Howell was shaking his head as far as I didn't know if you wanted to give input to what she was asking.
I know.
Oh,
No, I'm fine. I can stand over
here.
here.
Run away, Bob. Good try.
There's a piece that we've got to remember here, which is that, and it's unfortunate that the state is not doing this, but with the last MLTI purchase at the high school, it was a $100,000 refresh to our wireless network that we did receive through that process that we didn't pay for as a district. That was something that was provided. But in the meantime, since we've now had the machines at the high school for 4 years, we've invested monies because we've gone to digital books in many cases. And so, for instance, if you're in the U.S. history realm, it's cheaper to buy you a book on iTunes that lasts you for your existence through high school, so kids actually use it for multiple classes. It actually belongs to the kid when we're done, because the way iTunes work, it actually gets licensed to the kid. But the actual cost is far cheaper than buying a book and replacing it every 9 to 10 years, is to go ahead and do that way. We've also put some significant made a significant investment within our foreign language to the VHL program, in which kids now are using that for both Spanish and also within French. And for Spanish, I would need to check French, but that's a clear component of the curriculum that we've invested quite a bit of money into long-term licenses for those. And then the other places in science is that the vernier probes that kids use in physics labs as well as chemistry labs, we've bought the interfaces now that actually connect with the Mac. So if we were to change platforms, then all those investments and things that we've done, we would then have to look at either working with the companies for a replacement or looking at a replacement for those parts. So, as when you purchase something, you use it. You're obviously the other things as far as adding new programs. We've specifically bought Mac for those. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah.
As far as ed techs, you're saying they have different older computers. If we chose B, so you're saying there wouldn't be enough computers to refresh down to staff or ed tech level? Or
we do, and it's a variable, we do as well as we can for everybody. So we give them from whatever inventory we have available. We give them the best that we can give them. So there was concerns mentioned, well, we don't want things not used beyond the 4 year. We don't have a huge pile of very viable machines we're not using. We never did. I don't envision we ever would.
Thank you for joining us.
Sure.
Did you want to?
Because I believe Eric asked a question, kind of what would be the impact depending on A, B, and I believe I can speak to that. But I first want to just give you a sense of what reality is right now, just be clear about realities, and then give you those scenarios. I think it's important just to be thinking about that. When you think about the primary school, we have been, in a place where we expect hand-me-downs. It's been sort of the vein, unless we do some fundraising. And really important to think about how much money has been fundraised by our community to support technology within our school. For smart boards, for example, it's been an 8-year process right now that we continue to put those devices in spaces such as like our art classroom. There's the next space we're putting one in, and that's all coming from monies that we've been fundraising for. But the other piece I think that we need to keep in mind is, as Bob has talked about, for example, these 9-year devices, and Yes, they're not perfect, and the way Janie has described them is accurate. At the same time, I believe our tech department needs to be applauded for the fact that they work really hard to take the spares that we do have and make a workable laptop out of them. Not ideal, however, I see them when I run by their offices, which are fairly close to mine, and I know they're working hard to do that. I do think that's important to keep in mind. So at primary now, second and third grade have Dell laptops. Those were the ones that came mostly from the middle school. They are working for our testing environment. It seemed to work better this year for the MEAs. We had some glitches. However, most of those don't seem to be connected to the machine. That's really important because those are high stakes tests, and we don't want our students to be any more frustrated by the process and having the technology be a challenge. So that's second and third grade. So that's actually been somewhat of a little upgrade in the sense that we had the white MacBooks prior to that. So this is the first year with the Dells. At all of second and third grade. We did have Dells in the building before that. At K and 1, we have the white MacBooks that you've already heard about, so I'm not going to belabor that. And we have the approximately 5 iPads at each one of those K1 classrooms. So looking ahead to next year, with the iPads, being deployed at a 10 per classroom at K and 1, that actually helps with the white MacBooks as well, because it gives you more devices at that level that are going to be reliable. So that right there is going to be helping out. The other piece will be that you're allowing for the 5 at the second and third grade level. That also is going to help with some of that reliability. Not as impactful as it will be at the K1, because the devices at the 2 and 3, second and third grade level, the iPads are going to be much more differently than a laptop. They're going to do more of what you heard Rainey talk a little bit about, using it for producing of work, because at second and third grade they can start doing that. You won't see as much of that at like a K1 level. So really having that flexibility of 2 different devices at 2-3 is going to be really helpful. And I'm confident that with the help of our technology staff, we're going to be able to keep those Dells running at an efficient level. And we'll make do for a year with the white MacBooks if needed. However, if we're able to go Plan A, that what I just kind of described as Plan B, but if we go with Plan A, I'm confident that we're going to be able to, then we're going to be able to take the white MacBooks out of the picture, and also the Dells as well. And we'd have a place where K3 we would have the same laptop device. So if we do with Plan B, we're really only going to be able to potentially replace the white MacBooks, and not the white MacBooks in the Dells. And that's what Bob and I talked about earlier this week, that we could make it happen. But that's just how it. I hope that kind of helps. Eric, kind of see.
I'm just curious, do we have enough white Mac books to give to the school board for use for a week?
I'm sure a few teachers wouldn't mind giving up a couple here and there.
Really good idea. Just so I'm clear.
Yes.
So really, is it that Plan B impacts K1? Because then my thought process is, how often are K1 students using a laptop? Where if we're saying we're fine with the iPads, I totally envision them using them frequently.
Right.
But I don't understand, besides testing then, and if those machines worked okay for the testing, what other uses would you have with a laptop in K1?
Right. So let me back up. I'm going to answer your question. However, if we go with Plan B, I believe we will be able to replace the white MacBooks with the Airs that are freed up from the fact we'll be having at least 2 grades at the high school new MacBook Airs. So those ones would be able to come down to primary and Raymond Elementary School, and so they would go into K1. So then to answer the part of your question you're asking about why have laptops at those grades. What's happening now with those white MacBooks they are used often as in a center, or when you want to have intervention that goes on with the entire class or a group of more than 5 or even more than 10. Often what we see now happening is you have a classroom of, say, 3 teachers, and they'll each have 5 iPads, and they will cluster the 15 iPads into one classroom, and they will run all of that, try to run all of that program that they're using at that time on the iPads. Or in another place they'll do it with try and use it with the White Macs. So there is still that need for some specific programs to use the White Macs, and then if you're going to do some clustering of kids just to make sure they're all on a computer at the same time, you need some laptops to do that.
So even with Plan B, they're trickling down to K1.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, sir.
This chart that you sent us, is this the age of the devices going into next year? I'm showing the age of the devices of the MacBook Airs is 5 years.
Yes.
Are they 4 years this?
Yeah, they'll be starting year 5 on July 1.
Okay. So have we thought about maybe just purchasing brand new Airs for the lower grades? And I am looking at, it looks like 200 devices are at the Wyndham Primary School, 186 devices, and then I don't know where RES fits into this picture, but it looks like you need about 386 instead of 550. So I'm just curious, have we thought about maybe just purchasing brand new, and with the amount that the lower grades actually use these MacBook Airs, we wouldn't need to replace them anytime soon, would we?
Well, again, then we would, if we didn't replace them at the high school level, if we made that investment at a lower grade, you're not leveraging that money.
The 48 grand.
48,000. Doesn't help us.
It was a good thought, though.
Yeah. Okay.
Also, the younger grades, as much as I would love to have all of my teacher friends at the primary level get new MacBook Airs, they don't need the processing speeds that the older kids need.
Oh, I understand that. I don't know.
I guess I really still think that we suffer because we don't get to see. It's easy to think about but if you had to be in that field and see what was going on, maybe is there a way for people to come and see that?
Yes.
Because I guess, Scott, I put it like this: you run a crew of guys, they use the chainsaws. If you say, they're expensive, you can get by with hacksaws. Yeah, they could do the job, but it would take it wouldn't be ideal, it would be optimal. I guess that's how I'm trying to put it. Not that we want to spend money for the sake of spending money, but we want to make sure that everybody's got the tools to be doing their best work that they can do.
I see that the high school is using machines that are 5 years old. Do they significantly slow down in 4 years?
No. But again, availability of spares becomes an issue after 4 years.
Yep. I don't like it any way you put it.
Yeah.
So where are we? You kind of weighed in.
I weighed in already.
I just want to make sure, if I said B, everybody still is getting newer computers and it really is workable.
As much as possible, Diana, like Kyle had mentioned, if we get A, then we can look to grades 2 and 3 swapping out PCs and going to Airs, because we would have enough to do things like that.
Which would put you on one platform.
Pardon me?
Which would put you on one platform.
Right.
Put you on one platform. Right. If we don't, then clearly we're going to focus on K1 at primary school, and actually the old MacBook Airs at RES at K through 3. They're both in dire straits at those levels. So if we had enough devices, we would clearly, move the 2, 3. Yeah, Kyle's a good guy, and he takes what we give him. But again, they're 6 years old. When they're 7 years old and the hard drive goes, he's not going to be as patient that these are great machines and good enough. So we're going to hit that cliff sooner than we probably think. So planning ahead would be great. If the taxpayer and the board don't support it, we'll get by with what you give us, but optimally.
And what if they hit that cliff in the middle of testing? What if they quit during the middle of the MEAs, the DELs, or that's a significant, as Kyle said, that's a high stakes time, and if half of them are working and half of them aren't, however wonderful the tech department is at refurbishing them, that's a cliff.
But they're going to trickle down even with the 550.
But not the DELs. Right. If we go with B.
Right, but it's one more year of the DELs.
Yes.
How old are the DELs now?
They're 6. They're going to be 7 and starting their 7th year July 1.
So next year everybody will have 7-year-old devices, but it's for 1 year.
Correct.
For the DELs.
Correct.
Right. So we're not talking about keeping those around for year 8, 9.
If we did, we'd give them to an ed tech or somebody that wasn't like us.
You're making those old people sound insignificant.
I know, I'm not. I really, I don't view them that way. It's
I'm
just
beginning to feel bad for the ed techs.
Let's be honest, the students are much more important than we are. So they're.
Well, and I've asked how often do they use
What happens to, if you go and play B, what happens to Randy? We've talked, okay, what he's got, but what happens to Randy's school?
Well, Randy's got a smaller population, so it'll have a bigger impact even if we only get the 550. So we're going to do everything we can and focus on those lower grades first, and then spare pool is the last priority. And if we run out of spares, we have to buy to keep things going.
So you just do single purchases?
We've had to buy a few.
At how much? You still getting the same price, or do you pay more if you have to buy them singly?
No, it's about the same price. There's not an appreciable difference. Even if you buy a 10-pack from Apple, you get like $5 off a unit or something.
Wow. Woo! Wow, what a break. Oh, I apologize. Turn that off.
Oh, well, we still have all our... Any other questions or comments?
Ignore.
Thoughts? Here's your time.
I think I said what I
You've
was
said
saying.
your piece?
Yeah.
You've said your piece. You've said your piece.
I have.
Let there be peace.
The nicest little ones.
Right.
Thank you all for your time and support.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
And then open invitation to come on down and see what's happening with laptops, iPads, smart board.
Okay. So this is one large piece of the budget. We have to deliberate the whole thing of where we're at, even with the current figures.
But I think, if I'm not mistaken, you thought there would be other changes, John, as far as tax.
I do. I think that, the current year that we're in, we utilized $900,000 of the cash balance as a carry forward to reduce taxation. The current projection, $750. I'm thinking that's going to move up, which will bring the tax impact down. It will not bring down the expense side budget, but it will help with the tax impact. I'm sure that just knowing the finance committee members, they'll be looking at no more than single digit. It's currently at the 11 that you mentioned,
Right.
Kate. So that's what I'll be working towards with them in terms of the tax impact. But the expense side wouldn't change. It's 248, unless you have other ideas tonight.
Well, because even with option B, 150,000 in savings, I'm not sure. I don't have a calculator. How that would equate if we went with option B.
It's 2.15%, and as pointed out, with the current 750,000 projection cash forward, it would bring the Wyndham component to the 10.7 level, and the Raymond component to 1.28.
Taking out the 150 and raising that to 900, you said?
No, not raising it to 900.
Leaving it
The current
750. Doesn't change it very much.
No, regrettably.
Yeah.
But if we don't make any changes, then nothing changes at all.
No, I know. Well, I'll weigh in. I'd like to go with option B because it's 1 year, and if they're going to trickle down to Kyle and Randy, I get the spare pool thing, and I guess that's a risk I'm willing to take.
I think it's a partial rundown. It's not a full rundown.
Right, we're not going to be on a unified platform, but it's 1 year that we still deal with Dells, he said, that are 6 years old.
And Pete's not here, but given the benefit of where I think he might go, he would probably go with, if he was going to go with anything, he'd go with B.
Mm-hmm.
So that would kind of make us like a, I think, 4 to 4, and I don't know if that helps at all, and I have no idea what he knows.
One choice is big, because I can 2 moves.
Yeah, I think we're going to need direction from the board because we're not going to be able to find $300,000 in the operating budget that's not associated with what you're talking about tonight.
That was not my expectation that you were going to give me.
Well, I thought you indicated that if it was a 4 to 4, then
Oh no, I'm still on the technology.
yes.
That 150, it had nothing to do with the that. I'm sorry. If I
Just trying to understand.
That's all right.
Well, because we still have to hash out the rest of the budget, and we're all sitting. We're not voting tonight, but we need to have clear direction because on the 25th we have the warrant articles, and we need to have the amounts. So if there's anything else you have issue with, we need to raise it now.
One quick last question, Mr. Hickey.
Yes.
So on A, we spend 1.2 million. On B, we spend 6 and 6. So we're going to have to. So if we went with A, the next year we wouldn't be spending anything,
If you went,
so to speak.
No, it's 300,000 every year.
yeah, 300,000
We cut it in half.
for July 1, and then 300,000 the following July 1. Well, it would be over 4 years. You wouldn't spend it all in 1 month. You would commit to
Gotcha.
that.
Okay.
Right, but this is what's in the budget, the 300,000. So as far as the current budget, technology piece rose to the top, and was there anything else anybody needed clarity on? Questions, concerns?
Yes, I don't have a concern, but I will make one comment, and I appreciate that. I really appreciate all the work that your department does. I mean, it's a lot, along with the 18. I mean, people make a lot of sacrifices, and I get that. But I also want to make sure, and personally, I don't think I'm depriving any of our teachers or staff from having what they need to do their jobs. I feel a little harder, but it's, they can still get it done. But I want to get a budget out there that will pass. And I have heard from a lot of people out there, and I normally don't. This is the first year I've heard from a lot of people that they're very concerned about their taxes. And that always makes me a little nervous. That are people going to really vote for what we put there? I really don't want to come back and do this again. I don't think anybody else does. So getting back to really what I was going to say, Dawn, was I appreciate the fact that once you in your group get to sit down and go through all the other implications that will affect the tax that's going to hit the folks out there, it will be different than what we're looking at right now. The tax implication.
That's my guess, but it's the board's will, but I'm sure it will be.
I'm not saying what it would
Yeah.
be, but and I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any other issues other than computers?
That's what I was asking.
So if not, then I think we need to give some direction. I think unless anybody has any other jazz they need to
Direction is
get
where-
clarity on.
50-50.
I think we are about 50-50 on that.
Where were you at?
A. I was on the fence,
But then we're not 50-50. Because
We're channeling Pete.
but Pete's not here.
He's not here.
And
I know,
Anna's
it's kinda
not here.
weird.
So, I mean, with all the goodwill in the world, they're not here.
You know, I think, and I don't want anybody to take this personal. This is not personal. If I lived in Raymond, I think I would say, you know what?
Whatever.
Budget is great as is,
Yep.
because as far as my taxes,
1.79%.
are going up a very small amount, so I will gladly support the school system. This is nothing personal, but you know, but from the Wyndham side, it's not such a great bargain. And I appreciate all the work. I said that before, and I mean it. But, so I think it's very hard to gauge, you know, like, are we split, are we whatever. I guess it's kind of like you do the best you can, and you know how we feel.
I mean, the bottom line is,
yeah.
the only those that count are the ones who are sitting in the seats tonight.
Or maybe whoever's sitting here at the next meeting too. Sorry. Sorry.
But we're voting for a direction tonight.
We've got to
Right,
get that
yeah.
direction because
Right.
they have to have it.
Right. And
If we want A or B, then we have to adjust the figures and so
Right.
on and so
Oh, yeah.
on. And actually, there's already 4 of you.
I'm not sure, Eric, were you A or B? A.
Who's A?
I was on the fence.
Yeah, so was I.
I guess I don't know where we came up with the 4-year refresh rate anyway. So,
Milky.
right. So really, is it hugely, I shouldn't say that, I was going to say hugely impactful, but if you now switch it to 5, I know that's what we've been doing, but
I believe the correct
was with
terminology you're
certain-
looking for.
It was also
that was with Milty in place.
that the board wanted to smooth out the purchase cycle as well as the precedent that Milty set. So, and you can see from these blocks, if we shuffle around too much, it's easy to get off track.
right, get to that cliff again.
And the other thing I keep going back on, and not to put Chris on the spot, but at the last meeting we discussed this, Chris was telling us how old his are and how well they work. So sorry, Chris, not to put you on the spot, but let's go with personal experience.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, what are we telling Mr. Davis?
Well, I'm sticking with you, I'm sorry.
Oh, well,
And if
Do
we
you
have,
want show of hands, or what do you?
no, I think,
Well, we know everybody except Scott. Sorry to put you on the spot. That's fact.
That's fact, Jack.
Well, I mean, by simply going with option B isn't really going to do a whole lot as far as the tax implications. You know, you had just said that we need to vote with the people that are in this room, but I'm kind of thinking about all of my neighbors, and every single year their taxes are going up about $286 a year. Since I've lived in this town, my taxes have increased to the tune of almost $800. They've gone up. They've gone up a lot. So I'm having a hard time picking A, B, and C, to be totally honest with you.
Yeah.
If I have to pick the lesser of two evils, I guess I'm going with B, because I understand that the kids in the lower grades really need something. So I understand that and I appreciate that.
But then if you're saying you want us to find more savings, then it doesn't just stop with B.
No, it does not.
Then we would have to give Mr. Davis direction as to, we really want you to find $300,000 somewhere.
Yeah.
And I don't know if anybody is saying that, but that's what we need to be doing tonight.
Well, I feel like
Looking
Pete kind of
at-
did a little bit with and addressing the Katahdin program. We don't need to sit here and determine the fate of the Katahdin program, but I think that he actually, hit something, struck a chord when he said that, it's about 19, it comes out to about 19 grand per student with that particular program. So, is there something within that budget that we can look at? I don't know.
Go ahead. I think if we open that door, then we have to break it down as to, okay, this is what it costs per student for the kids in each one of the schools, and if we go to Raymond because of the number of students there, but we're still running full buildings, the cost per student there will be higher. So what are we going to do? You know what I mean? I think that it's not a bad subject.
Mm-hmm.
I think at this point in time, that is a totally different subject that we would have to, and maybe we want to look at, maybe it's worth looking at some point in time, but I don't think right now we have time to look at it.
Because the other thing that I think he didn't factor in, if we did away with that program, it could cost us a great deal more. If we have students that we had to place in other programs. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you know figures off the top of your head.
Yeah.
Could you just come and maybe help a little bit? Because I know that was his, Pete's two points of contention. So it kind of helps to have a little more information since I read that.
So what I picked up, and you guys can, Jenny, I'll just get them all.
Okay.
So what I'm passing around is just from the DOE website, the daily tuition rate for the approved special purpose private schools located here in the state of Maine. So as many of you know, some of the students attending Katahdin do have IEPs, some do not. Most of those students have attended Windham High School at one point or another. And for a myriad of reasons, there's a continuum of reasons why the large school environment, the large class size, has not been an appropriate fit for kids. And so the Katahdin program has allowed us to offer something in district, which is considered a least restrictive placement, to students. Because we had the Katahdin option, some of the students that we may have considered to sending out of district placements, we were able to take that off the table. So what you have in front of you is, I think of the Katahdin program, we're able to offer experiences similar to Future Builders or Maplestone. And for those of you that don't know, Future Builders is in Raymond. Placement in these programs is by an IEP team. Future Builders is one of the least expensive. That's $190 a day per student times 175 days plus summer school. Maplestone is $330 per day per student. So on average, for the students that we have currently in our district who are attending out of district placements, when I started my career, it was around $30,000. We are fast approaching $70,000 a year per student plus transportation. So if we even half that at $50,000, and we took 10 of the Katahdin students and we had to place them out of district, there's $500,000. So we can get into the weeds about the cost of the Katahdin program, but very quickly we would eat that money up in some shape or form from the budget. So I'm happy to talk more about the specifics. And certainly willing to look at ways that we could maybe consolidate some of the administrative pieces of Katahdin, if that would help to get money to the kids. Rich and I have talked a little bit about options that we could look at. But in terms of the actual pupil per cost, it's still a really relatively inexpensive cost compared to what we would have if we had to do something different. It's very helpful for everybody to know that, because I think people aren't aware of what it costs in outside sourcing. Yeah.
So if I hear you correctly, you're saying that the program is saving us enough money to pay for option A. Awesome.
Correct. That's exactly what I said, because it's coming out of my budget.
You are generous.
Yes, I am generous. Yeah.
So there's 24 kids roughly in the Katahdin program.
Correct.
How much outsourcing do we do for these 24 kids?
Right now, everything that we do for those kids is
Every
done
single
in-house.
thing is done in-house.
Yep.
Okay.
So we have a social worker, we have 3 teachers, and then Rich, who
Okay.
is associated with that program, and then Paulette, who's the secretary.
Okay. So if we outsourced, you are saying that our costs would probably double, triple?
I would say triple.
Triple.
Yeah.
Okay.
Easily. So, because you have to look at what the other issue is, what's available. So, I feel like I'm preaching to the choir a little bit, but that the needs of students are increasing, particularly in the mental health issue area, and also opiate addiction. So we're very fortunate in Cumberland County. We have a number of out-of-district placements. You can see by the list which are geographically. That said, there are programs that are 5 and 6 kids deep waiting. So we know we have a couple students that we've considered other options. They're more therapeutic environment, that sort of thing. We can't get them in this year. We're lucky to get them on a waiting list possibly for January of next year. So in the meantime, we then have to look at, okay, what are their options? So we have tutoring. We have, kids not coming to school. It's not a win situation. So the Katahdin program allows us to get kids to school. We do door-to-door service for driving. And kids who have historically not attended school for much of their middle school career have not missed a day since coming to Katahdin. So there's a lot of overall benefits for not just the students, but their families. And then also our graduation rates and all those kinds of things. So.
I have more questions, but without actually doing exactly what you guys said we weren't going to do tonight.
Right, sure. My understanding is that maybe doing a workshop.
So close.
Maybe another time.
Right, we will. I think we definitely should. Yeah, it's good education for us. Yes. So we appreciate that. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
I'm happy to answer any questions.
Absolutely. I'll be in touch.
So the other thing to bear in mind is if we wanted them to cut further, typically we do not dictate which programs.
Mm-hmm.
That's the other thing to bear in mind. You know what I mean? So you can't just say, well, we want 200,000 taken out of Katahdin or Lisa's budget. So
yeah, I understand that.
Right, they meet and decide, as was the case last year when we were asking them to hit a target. So, however, with the computers, if we had an overwhelming majority saying we wanted option B, would that be honored? If we were telling you that's what we would like to do? Or would you say, well, we're going to find 150 elsewhere?
I don't think we could find 150,000 elsewhere. I don't think it would be on.
It'd have to be that. Is that where we're at? Well, if there's no other, if everybody's fine with the number, because that's all we
Which
can.
number?
Well, the budget. This is a budget deliberation, so if there's any pieces you're not happy with, this is when you have to speak now.
I'm not clear where we landed though with the direction for the computers.
Well, so far,
Yeah, it looks.
Every other one of us is A.
I guess I'm going with B because it's the lesser of two evils.
So the Bs are outnumbered with the current peoples.
And I struggle too because other than tax implications.
No, why was it B starting out?
I guess I've never had them just because I've had to work with computers. I got to a point one time when I was on tech support with a guy in the company I worked with, and he said, you know what, it's time for your computer to get the Coca-Cola virus. I go, Coca-Cola virus? In other words, we couldn't make it work, so pour Coca-Cola on it, so they had to force to get you a one. So nobody wants to work under that condition. I know I don't. And I guess that's where my passion comes from. I've had to do it, and it's not enjoyable.
If I thought that all of the work at the school needed to be done on a computer, I would be revolt. right beside you on that.
Well, there's another part to that. You're absolutely correct. Not everybody. I would love to drill down to. I would love to drill down to that. I don't know that I can. We can here and now, but yeah, I see that too. I don't think it's it's a 50-50 basis, but there is a certain component of people that aren't using them, which parents see, and it makes it hard for them to want to support that. But I'm sure the 18 will work with that.
And the difference between A and B would do exactly 300,000 less in our budget. 150 less.
Right.
Right. And that would change the percentage of increase between Wing and Raymond. How much? What would that look like, Don?
You're now talking tax implication?
Yeah.
Just less than 1% for Wyndham. And let's see.
I can rattle them off if you'd like.
Yeah.
So, as is, Wyndham's at 11.15, factoring in the 150 savings, plus the amount that we have in the carry forward currently is 750. So that would bring it down to 10.7. And Raymond is at 1.79, and that would go down to 1.28. And the other thing that we are going to look at in the Finance Committee is to see if we could potentially increase the carry forward from 750 to 9, but that's not determined yet.
I mean, it's not a big enough win to not go with A.
I guess, I don't live in Wyndham, but we sell the budget as a whole district. I would actually like to see the Wyndham get below 10%, but I don't know what that would mean, because I don't know if we're going to have difficulty selling it this year.
I think you might.
I know, because we do hear chit chat. So that's my concern. So yeah, it's kind of difficult that we're even just talking about 150,000, but it doesn't get us below the 10%. However, does the 900? Did you do that calculation?
I have not, but
I don't want to put you on the spot.
No, it's fine. I'm pretty confident that it would, or we would get to a number that would bring it to a single digit. That's what
It would possibly get to a single digit.
With scenario A versus B?
With using the cash forward.
With scenario B plus increasing the.
No, I just asked him scenario A.
No, I'm referring to scenario A, and using more balance forward should bring that down.
Below 10?
Well, yeah, it's going to be high 9s, but
9.99.
Yeah. If you give me a minute, I might actually be able to do this.
So I guess that since we wanted to be able to vote next week, do you have all the information you need to be able to vote next week, or were there things you wanted tweaked?
I would be very interested to see how much, judging by what Don is doing right now, I'm very interested to see that. So I want to see that before I answer that question.
I can do that. You give me just a moment, please.
Because if we just throw out figures, then we send it back to the A team to figure out.
$1.1 million as opposed to $750 when you carry it forward would reduce the Wyndham tax increase to 9.92.
But that's 1.1.
1.1 million, and that would reduce the Raymond percentage increase to 0.6, which, if you give me a minute, that would be $254 on the Wyndham annual tax increase, and $13 on the annual increase to the Raymond tax. So the Finance Committee needs to meet. That's the number. I mean, you asked what the number is. That's what the number is. So.
Usually when we do get together and we go for a consensus. We go with what the majority is. It does not, as far as direction, it does not mean that people who are not in favor of it are stuck with voting for it. It's kind of like you can always, my thing is if I say, hey, and think to myself, I'm sorry, I really believe in B, blah, 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 whatever, you know, well, I don't have to vote. You know, when all is said and done and we have a final figure, I don't have to vote for it. Do you know what I mean? So you're talking about the final budget. I'm talking about the final budget because I think that might make a big difference, and nobody agrees with me, and that's fine. I think we're not being fair, and I say this because I'm a B voter. We're not being fair to the 8 voters because we are a lesser number, and we're trying to get everybody. Well, what if we go with B? And kind of like, you know what? That's not the way we roll. We roll with.
Are we missing 2 people?
We're missing 2 people.
Yeah,
you know what
one's
I mean?
a B and one's an A. I can tell you that. I can tell you that.
I can tell you right now too. So, you know, and that's true. So we should kind of go with.
I think we're represented. I think we're represented right now.
Come next time.
So there you have it.
I mean, I don't agree with it. That doesn't mean anything.
Maybe you can take the
consensus.
I would feel the same way if I was in my
Yeah, sure.
I mean, that's the process.
It's the process. So, you know, it's kind of like we could sit here like all night, but I'm not going to change my mind, and he probably not, and he might not. So it's kind of like the majority says they like A. So let's figure a budget with A. And we'll see, and we can always not vote for it.
Right.
You know, but like Scott said, we really need to see after the finance committee meeting what really do we have for a number.
Can you say that percentage one more time? I'm assuming that you still have it because I didn't get a chance to write it now. 9.92. 9.92. And Raymond?
0.6.
0.6.
0.6. All right.
And you said it had to tax him per year.
Wyndham was 254 and Raymond was
13. Just to clarify, based on a house value of $250,000.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
And that was with the 1.1 carry forward.
Correct.
Yep.
So, process-wise, if finance is meeting before the vote on the 25th.
Yes. Yeah. So you'll know that evening before you vote what their recommendation.
Except we need the numbers really firmed up tonight to be able to vote on the warrants.
Well, again, we're talking revenue versus expense. The expense budget will be at what the majority is willed tonight, which is the full budget with A. That's what's going to come next 25th.
It just won't be the tax implication.
Right.
Right. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. We good?
Yep.
I know.
The funny thing is, you're more liberal, I'm more conservative in politics, but we're both on the opposite ends. It's just funny how that goes.
It's a tax implications.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. Going once, going twice. All right. We can move along then to the next item on the agenda, which is the Greater Sebago Education Alliance Regional Service Center, or SEA 2.0.
If I may,
Yep.
I'd like to just give some history for the board and for the public about this agenda item. And the board has a packet, quite a bit of information that I'm sure it's hard to absorb it all in one night. But generally speaking, a little history here. The RSU 14 has been involved with the Sebago Alliance for quite a while. It was a opportunity for several districts to come together. Westbrook had 6, Gorham, RSU 14, to talk about ways that we could save money and do things together, whether it's professional development, whether it's a technology summer camp, whether it's bringing the curriculum directors together and to share services. That happened over the years. And so I think it's no surprise in the state of Maine through consolidation, which we chose to consolidate between Wyndham and Raymond, that people are really trying to get smarter about how can we share services, reduce administrative costs. And as you know, through the PowerPoint, our administrative cost has fairly low compared to a lot of districts, compared to the state average as well. So we're on this journey of trying to always think of ways that we can reduce costs, do shared services. And so with this new regionalization service center that has come out of Department of Education in the state of Maine, it's an opportunity to look at financial incentives. And the governor has been pretty explicit that districts that want to join a regional service center, that you will receive additional revenue. So for instance, if we did this, we would get an extra $55,000 for this coming year to use as an offset on our budget. So there's an incentive not only to do shared services, but also I think Department of Ed is really being smart to try to give you some money to jump into this opportunity. So the SEA, the 4 or 5 districts that have always met over the years, came together and said, could we do this regional service center? We had a consultant work with us this past fall. And as a result, many districts in Cumberland County wanted to jump on this opportunity. So let me just share those districts that have come together. First of all, RSU 14, South Portland, Westbrook, SAD 6, Gorham, Portland, Cape Elizabeth, RSU 15, which is Gray, RSU 5, which is Durham, Freeport, Scarborough, and then the Brunswick school system. So that's 11 districts that have come together to say, let's have a regionalization center. So your vote tonight is really non-binding. It just gets the process moving. We've worked with the school attorney. She's laid out a format. And in your packet, there's really 3 steps that you have to be mindful of tonight. It's non-committal, non-binding vote just to authorize us to file the Part 2 application. So all these districts are going before their board right now to make that happen. And then April 25th, you're going to have to approve the interlocal agreement for the Greater Sebago Ed Alliance Regional Service Center. And that's an opportunity for the board chair to sign that interlocal agreement on behalf of the school board. This authorizes submission of the interlocal agreement to the commissioner of the Department of Ed. And then the third piece is to put on our warrant article. We would ask the public to support this opportunity. So those are the 3 steps. Again, every district is involved in this process with their boards and trying to make this work. They're very committed to this work, and I think surprisingly, DOE's been very flexible with this. They know that this is hard work and some of the timelines may not happen as they prepared to put this out 6 months ago. They've been very flexible in working with districts because they really want this to happen. So my feeling is I think it's, again, an opportunity to work with other districts. There's 4 areas that we're going to look at. Right now I've committed to 3 of those areas. And let me talk, first of all, the 4 areas. Shared professional development. This would be an area that all the districts would work on to share services. And we're looking at a leadership academy, particularly for teacher leadership, and working with USM on that. The second one is substitute hiring, training, and diversity hiring practices. We all hire people. We're all competing against each other. Is there a way to have like an opportunity to do almost like a hiring fair, come together and do this as a group? And so I bought into that. The third one is purchasing, bulk purchasing and food services. Opportunity to really look deeper at that, and is there ways that our school nutrition specialists can really work together to purchase food items. I bought into that and recommended that as well. The third one that is the English second language intake process that Portland is particularly really good at. It's quite an intake process when you have second language students come to your district. And I think the outlying districts of the SEA really could learn from Portland. So we're holding off on that one, but very supportive of Portland helping us get better at that. So those are the four areas that we have opportunities to grow and to take part of. There would be a board of directors. There would be definitely the superintendents involved with that. We would have an executive director. And that's sort of a nutshell, big picture of what this is. So I would be happy to take questions. It's, again, how I see it. We've had SEA. We've had this opportunity to do shared services that just expands it. It provides a little revenue from the state. And I think we're in a good position to call SEA now SEA 2.0 would be the new name.
In our packet, there's a draft of the interlocal agreement. Is that the agreement that we're going to be voting on the 25th, or has it changed since you gave us this?
Right now it is. It could change with the school.
So it changed the chairperson's name. It says Marge Galulio.
Yeah. But that is Marge, what we've been voting.
Thank you.
Yep.
I'm going to sit next to you.
Look at you.
So,
Yes, Jamie.
The total revenues, what does that mean? On the next to the last page.
A1.
So revenue, I guess my question is what the term revenue means. I mean, I know what revenue means. I mean, in this situation, what is revenue?
Well, it's similar to the current, you currently have in your operating budget $5,000 for the current SEA.
Right,
so
right.
This would also, the group could assess fees to run whatever they decide to do, which is to hire, for example, an executive director, if they want to do professional development with outside help and whatnot. There also is, for the first year only, as you see in that calculation, $97,200 that will accrue to each district, as I recall. Each district, yes. Maybe you have to clarify that, but I'm pretty sure it's each district for the first year only. And the reason for that, as I understood it, was that they don't know what the expenses are going to be for each one of these RPCs initially. And then in the second year, when you've operated, then they will know what the expenses are, and that will change based on what your actual expenses are. I've only been to 2 of the meetings. So that's my recollection.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, so will our $5,000 membership fee be jumping to 11?
Yes.
It will?
Yeah.
And is that going in this year's budget?
Correct.
Okay.
I think 5,000.
Yeah, the budget has 5.
Budget
You're talking this year or the next?
Talking this year. Is it budgeted in our books right now for 11,000 or 5,000?
So that's next year's budget.
It is going to be next year's.
You want to add? No.
Your question? So when I pulled up the regional service centers at a glance, and maybe that's in this packet, The one thing that kind of struck me is, can members withdraw? It sounds like that's a tough one to do.
Yeah, at one time, we were told that you could not withdraw. As you see, and what Kate's talking about is near the back of the plans. So if you look at that, to withdraw, the district must demonstrate to DOE that there will be no increase in costs or decrease in student programs for both the withdrawing school unit and the remaining members. So it's at the very bottom of that page.
So once you're in, you're in.
I found it in the draft though.
What in, what out?
Withdraw, termination, dilution, transfer. So it's in two parts.
May I interrupt momentarily?
Sure.
I just want to make, we will double check whether that $97,200 accrues to the district or is split. That's an answer you need, which we'll give you.
Oh, that's split out 11 ways? You mean?
That's what we're
That's
going
the
to clarify.
Yeah, that was my question.
But there is a thing saying on the impact facts, important facts you did it, Russell. Says that the state would give us $55,000 for joining for each district.
That's what we would get for revenue.
That's correct, and that is in your revenue stream under the ED 279. The allocation shows as a plus because you folks made the application, Sandy made the application. That is part of the revenue stream already in the current FY19 proposal.
So if I'm reading this right, the executive director would get reimbursement from the state for 55%, right? And
Correct.
so of the 11,000, does that include the executive director fee, or are we going to expect more expense?
I haven't worked on the expense budget. I don't know if you've done that.
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
Good question, though.
Is
Potentially a whole lot more than 11.
the executive director, is that an entity that doesn't belong to any of the districts? Or is it, you used to rotate between, remember the SEA?
It would be within that group.
Blah, blah, blah. So it'd be in that group.
So the 11 towns would come together and have an executive director.
Would it be one of the directors, or whatever we're calling them, from one of the?
In the old days, we were the fiscal agent. But that's
Not
this
gonna
is
happen.
different. Okay.
No, I understood as there will be a person
Is it a
that
separate
is
person?
running.
If you hire a
Chris
person,
knows.
you
Chris
can,
knows.
Chris knows.
Yay!
So part of the agreement, and I know that Sandy put in front of you tonight, is the opportunity to do the application, so that there's an opportunity to get this thing to the Department of Education for their April deadline to get the ball rolling. Part of what the discussions have been on all the interlocutor agreements is nobody's quite sure yet what the different cost components are going to be, and there's an initial small fee to just get the ball rolling to get this up and running. Which will be divided across. At our last meeting, SAD 6 agreed to be the fiscal agent for the group, considering if this all goes forward within all the different groups. And there is some startup money that is then allocated to the interlocal agreement group. So the 11 towns, there's some startup money that will then be administered by that fiscal agent. And part of this is that if you're looking at professional development and you're also looking at food service and some of the different components that are being done, nobody's quite sure yet what the savings will be with that, and nobody's quite sure yet what the cost will be. And so some of that information is still being determined and still moving forward. I think the important thing tonight is just giving that authorization to allow this application to go forward. One of your questions, Kate, was about withdrawing. And that's something that's been very, very clear through this, is that once that agreement is done, the way that it's written, it is difficult to withdraw, but also districts can choose at that point to not partake of services that are being offered within that unit, and so almost can go dormant. So even though you might still be part of the organization, you may not be purchasing services in that, so you have that opportunity where you're spending minimal funds in order to maintain your membership within that group. But part of what Department of Education wanted to see and the governor wanted to see is that districts coming forward in order to be able to do this. And I think it was 2 meetings ago, Sandy, that we were at. Folks from the DOE were there, and they're quite excited to see the group that's being established here, because I think we're close to 28,000 students that would be within this agreement. And there's some great opportunity for large-scale buying when you're representing that many students. And even at our last meeting, there was some discussion. York County's coming together as a group of even doing some combined food purchasing with York County and this group, which is, majority of schools that are located within Cumberland County. There's some huge buying power there offered through that. But there's definitely some other financial questions that I know before you have the opportunity to vote. We'll get those answers to you from that agreement.
Just to be clear, though, the fiscal agent is different from an executive director, correct?
Correct. The fiscal agent, much like in the old days when RSU 14 was the fiscal agent for Sebago Alliance, they were obviously back office functions that needed to be done. The board of directors will be the superintendents, and with the funds that are allocated to that agreement by the Department of Education, there's some opportunity to hire an individual who could help with the processes, and some of those budgeting things are still being worked out. I think the important key again for us tonight is that let's keep this ball rolling. Let's make sure that we make the deadlines for DOE so that an application can be done. And we've had the benefit of being in Sebago Alliance, now being the greater, our Sebago Alliance, the title's on there.
The greater.
It's there.
Greater Sebago.
Greater Sebago Ed Alliance. There's some great opportunity there, I think, for, again, for purchasing the professional development, the substitute, and as well as all the functions with ELL students that Portland, Westbrook, and South Portland would be really kind of keying in on.
Boy, John, your protege is doing well.
Also,
Great. Any other questions? No.
no, really.
Then if I could have a motion to move forward.
I move. Oh wait, I'm on the wrong one. Sorry. I should make a motion to authorize the submission of a Part 2 application to the Commissioner of the Department of Education to approve the formation of the Greater Sebago Education Alliance Regional Service Center, provided that RSU 14 membership and participation in the Regional Service Center is subject to approval by this school board and by the voters of the RSU 14.
Second. All those in favor? It is unanimous.
So this goes on in July? June? Is it going to go on in June?
Yes, the one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And then
Right.
on the 25th, you'll hopefully be
Yeah.
able to vote.
For the interlocal agreement. Do you want to do that? Something.
So we have all that vagueness, but we're going to vote on the 25th?
Hopefully
There will be less days.
Okay.
Yeah, I know. I had the same concern actually, because that's our next meeting.
Yeah.
All right, moving right along. We have the report of the secretary. We have a group of minutes that we need to approve.
I approve the minutes of the February 28, 2018 meeting.
All those in favor? It's unanimous.
I approve the minutes of the March 15, 2018 meeting.
Second.
All those in favor? It's unanimous.
I'm just going to keep on rolling.
Okay.
I approve the
Go
minutes
for
of
it.
the March 19, 2018 meeting.
Second.
All those in favor? Unanimous.
I approve the minutes of the March 21st, 2018 meeting.
Second.
All those in favor? Unanimous.
I approve the minutes of the March 28, 2018 meeting.
Second. Second.
All those
My part.
Those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. Our next order of business is our committee reports. I'll start down with you, Scott.
Go ahead, Scott.
We had a facilities meeting today, except I didn't put it in my calendar. So, Kate, how'd that go?
Well, actually, we had a really good meeting.
Right.
We missed you. Jen and I and Marge and Sandy and Chris and Bill and Lisa met with the adult ed staff, which was Tom Nash, and forgive me, I can't forget the other two gals' names. But we had a walkthrough of the current. I'm sorry?
And Rich.
Oh, yes, Rich was there, the Katahdin director. And we walked through the current adult ed facility, which is the proposed location for the Katahdin program for next year. And Bill and Rich kind of talked us through the new proposed use of that area. We also heard concerns from adult ed about their move out to a portable out beyond the building as far as a smaller space. So that was discussed. Bill talked about, we walked out to the parking lot where the portable would be located and discussed all of the amenities that would go into the building, and there was actually a blueprint of how that would be broken up. Bill's working exceedingly hard on this project, trying to maintain costs and trying to find a used portable versus a new portable, which I can't remember whether it's double or triple the cost. So, the cost is a consideration. We want to keep that down while also maintaining the integrity of the program for the adult ed folks.
Just because I wasn't there.
Yes.
That modular going pretty much where the adult ed entrance is, just in the back there somewhere?
It's shoved in the green triangle next to the staff. I think it's the staff parking lot.
It's the field garage where they keep all the mowers and the paint and stuff like that. It's in that piece of grass back there.
Below it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Between the two parking lots.
Right.
Oh.
And actually, if you want to drive by, Bill has stakes there that shows
you can see
physically where you land.
Okay.
And then when we did the walkthrough into, we talked about, we were in the physical portion of adult ed, and then there is discussion about also using one of the rooms outside of that main area. And we had a little bit of an in-depth discussion about access to that room and perhaps putting in a new doorway there so that the students wouldn't have to access through the library. It's awkward for everybody, and we felt that probably would be the better way in our great esteemed wisdom. So it was a very informative meeting. It was good to see where Rich landed on it, and it looks like they're exceedingly pleased with the office space that they're really limited with, and that they could do some one-on-one with some services with staff, with students that would be really helpful. So Bill is going to continue to look at the portable space and see if perhaps there are some accommodations that could increase their footprint, because that was a concern that was expressed by Tom Nash and his staff. And then after that, we took a little jaunt up to Field Allen, and Bill showed us where the 6th grade modular would be and the layout for that, and the access then would be closer to the main building, and we saw a little schematic of that. There's a lot of detail to it, but it looks good. So it was, Mr. Chairman, it was a very good.
That's great.
It was a great meeting.
So
excellent.
You really know how to control a meeting.
No, absolutely.
Thank you for setting that up.
Do me a favor and just craft up some minutes and throw those out there. Great.
Second.
Thank you.
Dawn, have you been to any adult ed meetings?
No, I'm no longer on adult ed.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I'm
Anna
looking
has
at you.
adult.
I know it's
I'm
Anna.
just
Anna has it.
When it came out, I'm like,
technology
wait a minute,
and
we switched
with
Friday.
Eric, and there hasn't been any technology meetings.
There is no technology committee.
Okay.
I'm on the math committee,
Oh, that's right.
and I've attended 2 math workshop committee meetings, one with the entire K-12 group, and one with the K-3 group, or K-4 group. And they were both highly interesting meetings. And the one with the entire group, we're discussing a go forward about the planning of the work that I can't remember his name. Yes, was doing, and he will be at one of our June meetings to discuss and to present his go forward there. The meeting on that was last week that we met with just the K-4 people, it was to look at all the considerations that we had to make when we were choosing a program, and then to look at all the programs that we had. And we were able to look at several. And what we wanted to do was bring forward to really discuss as a group. I was not there for that part, but I will be attending the one on May 9th, I believe. What's the early release day?
Yeah.
If that's May 9th, that's the one I'll be going to. And that will be with the middle school people. It's fascinating to me. And we had to do math, which I suggested that they make everybody here do math. Just to show the processes and how fascinating it is, and it was fascinating to all of us.
Good. Thank you.
It's good meeting.
I would probably flunk because you can't do 1 and 1 is 2 anymore. It has to go.
Oh, you're getting a white MacBook Air.
That's news or
There's no meeting today.
okay. If there's anything you say, catch us up.
No meeting this month. They do have. They are not doing their graduation. Math Paths is not doing it at the school anymore, which is kind of
Really? Where are they doing it?
I forget what. Did they say they were going?
Mayoral Auditorium.
Yeah, which is kind of a bummer. I loved it at the school. It was nice. It was comfortable. I mean, a lot of parents liked it, and they had it down in the shop. They just cleared it all out and set it all up. Did a beautiful job. You're laughing, but that was cool though. But anyway.
Mayoral Auditorium is a bump up.
It really is.
Just go.
But there's not a lot of them, so I don't know how you. I mean,
But it
there's
makes
not
it
a lot
special.
of kids.
It
Yeah.
makes it special.
Maybe they can backfill with a lot of other things, But bless you.
Bless you.
But things are pretty quiet.
Okay.
It's pretty quiet. I would suggest, though, you might want to get on their Facebook page. You know, I think you can.
Yeah, I deleted it.
I'm on it.
Just kidding.
You can not delete it.
Mine did.
Because they've got there are some great accomplishments going on over there. I mean, there are kids getting awards. I mean, they're from the competitions, and I never get the names right of what is what. Decker, is that the car one? You know what I mean? Sad to say, I haven't noticed a lot of Wyndham kids that are the winners of these things, you know, but in all, the students are coming in right at the top of everything, be it the fashion, the music ones, the automotive, and there is, and I don't have the number yet, but there's a majority of their students that go on to secondary schools.
I think the difference is in fashion, some of those kids are using a sewing machine, but the women kids just use threads and needles.
Don't be mean. We'll put you in as a mannequin.
You saw where that was going quickly,
Yes,
didn't you?
I did.
We're sitting next to him next time.
Well, it's good information that they have a Facebook page. I didn't know that.
They do, and they post everything on there. their botanical, they're outside, their culinary, the quick foods, the drafting, the auto mechanics, the marine repair. They post everything. Every time they have something, they put it on. It's really good page. You should just get stats and I think Westbrook. I don't know why I don't get Westbrook, but anyway.
Thank you. Ms. Fritz, what's going on with policy?
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. We'll be meeting. It's 10 to 9 now. We will be meeting in the next month to discuss the grading and reporting policy, and that's with the high school and middle school staff. The graduation policy is on hold. There was some legislation, well, you actually attended some of that stuff, where they're talking about the proficiency-based diplomas, and we're on hold until they really have a better idea of how that's going to land, and specifically with special ed students. Sandy has requested, in light of the recent tragedy, that we look into a suicide policy, so that we have something in place. And I've emailed Charlotte Bates at MSMA to see if she has any information that she could forward to us. I'm not quite certain at this point whether it should be a policy or whether it's just a procedure within the building. So that's just a work in progress, but we're going to be doing some research on that. And facility issues will be coming before you. I hesitate to even say that out loud, but we will be coming before you with our recommendation for a vote to have the policy be in effect for the beginning of the school year. Are you sure? Nope. Working hard on it though. And I think that's it.
We also met on the tobacco.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
We met on,
right.
thank you for reminding me, yes. Mr. Howe at the high school and the middle school administrators met with policy committee to discuss their concerns about vaping in the schools, which if you even remotely read the newspapers has become a huge issue for our schools. So Chris has done some revisions on our policy to tighten up our procedures to maybe address that. It's so new, but it's become a fast-moving issue. So that will be coming before you as well. Thanks for reminding me of that.
Yeah, we're just trying to think of what else we can do.
Yeah.
All right. And finance hasn't met recently, but we will meet next.
Thank you. Yes,
2 weeks.
Mr. Hensley would like to meet on April 25th, 5:15. We will take this.
Okay.
In rain.
Did you write that down?
I'm putting it in my calendar right now.
Yeah, good luck with that.
I know that is though. It's on my calendar. It's
Terry will find something out.
Any other?
Just that we have advertised for the high school principal's position, and we're moving along very well. And we anticipate after April vacation to begin the interview process. Chris Howell's leading that pack, and I would think by the middle of May we should have a candidate. In addition to that, I should be able to announce Friday of this week the new principal of Wyndham High School. So,
Oh, the other one was assistant, right? I thought you said
yes,
principal.
I'm
You meant
sorry.
assistant principal.
The assistant principal.
Right.
is what
Right.
it is.
I was confused for a minute.
Sorry about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah,
Oh.
I did too.
So, moving along.
Good to hear.
Who are you announcing Friday? Sorry.
Friday will be announcing the new principal.
Oh, the new principal.
Right.
And the assistant
The
principal.
assistant principal is
After
in process,
vacation.
but after
Okay.
April vacation, I would think easily by the middle of May,
Okay,
we should have a decision.
that's great.
Unless they find somebody for assistant,
Then just,
Okay. Are there any other committees or anything I missed? No? Okay. All right, then as far as I guess that isn't board roundtable. Kate and I went to the Wyndham High School and Sandy, I'm sorry, to the student breakfast, and that was really fun. What was that called with the boxes? Since I'd never seen it before. It was something with lock boxes. Is that what it's called? Okay. So we played a game with some freshman math students, and it was really, they use it, I guess, in different classes, not just math. She mentioned a couple of teachers that use this in their classes as well, like maybe history and English. So you had to solve puzzles in order to open a locked box that had prizes, and it was cool because the kids were so into it, and actually we were very into it.
Well, we were on a prize team.
Yes, we were.
There we go.
We were on a prize team, but the lockbox had 4 locks on it, so you had to. There were 4 puzzles,
and just the working together with the students was really was fun, and they were very engaged. So that was the best part. So we only have one more meeting, and we actually are going to change it back to brunch. It seems like we were trying to accommodate the breakfast, which is at 7:30, so that more of you could come. However, since that wasn't happening, for the last one that's going to end up in May, and I don't have in front of me what that date is, but I'll remind you, we're going to move back to the 10:30 time. But I do encourage you to try to attend those if you can, because it's really great information, and it's nice to see what's going on in the school. So, okay.
And they have good food.
Did you mention whose team won?
Oh, that's good.
Evidently.
What was in the box? Donuts. It was. All right, as far as board roundtable, Jenny, I'll start down with you.
Okay, I don't want to steal the thunder of somebody who was in the cast and the parent of somebody who was in the cast, but I saw Mary Poppins last weekend at Jordan Small Middle School, and it was great to see those kids do well, especially the English accents was pretty funny, and they were really, really good. That's it.
You have anything, Scott?
Yes, I want to give a shout out and congratulations to Lily McLean. She managed to finish her first season at Shawnee Peak race team, and she managed to land herself Rookie of the Year.
Yay!
So
that's great.
I'm pretty proud of her, so I just wanted to give her a quick shout out. She didn't miss any practices.
I do not have anything.
And I think everybody probably read it. I don't know if it came in the MSBA or anyway, all those things that come and then I forward them to everybody. So it looks like the CBS thing is held off for at least one more year. So it won't be, if people wonder why, all of a sudden we're not talking about it, it's because up in Augusta they can't figure out what they want to do yet. So isn't that amazing?
I'm glad.
So I am really too, and I really appreciated the fact when I read that a lot of the concerns that were raised were really valid things that we would think of. It's kind of like if you can't support where it is now, how are you possibly going to give the school department the money to be able to run a program? Right. So I think the rationale behind why they're taking a second look at it is very appropriate. And that's all I have. Okay. Waiting for spring.
I just wanted to recognize Genevieve, which is our student board representative. The list came out for the top 10% students, and Genevieve was on the list.
Hey, good for her.
Genevieve.
Congratulations.
I'm sorry, I can't list all of her kids. Anyway. Nothing to share. Anything else? Last chance?
Good.
Alrighty then. I guess we're done.
When is that? When is that top 10% dinner?
It's usually the beginning of June.
June 3rd.
June 3rd.
June 3rd.
That would be June 3rd. Yeah, we'll be Can you say that louder?
I move to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
All those in favor? It is unanimous. Good evening. I probably should have brought that list.
Hey, Dawn.
Well, they had a check.
I have a couple questions about the checks.
10%.